There is a building in Indianapolis that opened in 1909. It was the Ancient Order of United Workmen Lodge Hall, constructed with red brick and carved limestone lintels. It featured a meeting room that seated 300 people and cost $22,000 to build, funded entirely by member dues. The men who built it were machinists and universal clerks. When they grew old and could no longer work, the lodge paid them $6 a week. When they died, the lodge paid $2,000 to their widows. The federal government had nothing to do with it because Social Security did not exist. The question is not why America built Social Security in 1935, but rather what America already had and why that system had to be replaced. Before Franklin Roosevelt signed anything, and before any congressional committee debated benefit schedules or eligibility ages, Americans had already built a functional, decentralized system for keeping their elderly alive. It was not elegant and it was not universal, but it worked at a scale that textbooks have largely forgotten to mention. The fraternal order landscape from 1880 to 1920 was enormous by any measure. The Independent Order of Odd Fellows, founded in the United States in 1819, reached a peak membership of over 1.5 million by 1900. The Ancient Order of United Workmen, established in 1868 by a Pennsylvania machinist named John Jordan Upchurch, had enrolled 450,000 members by 1890. It operated a death benefit fund that paid $2,000 to the family of every member who died while in good standing. The Knights of Pythias, founded in 1864, maintained a separate endowment rank specifically for life insurance and burial coverage, with over 475,000 enrolled members by 1895. These were not social clubs, they were mutual insurance institutions with constitutions, audited treasuries, elected benefit trustees, and actuarial tables maintained by lodge secretaries who took the work seriously. The benefit structures were contractual and specific. The Odd Fellows uniform rank paid $5 weekly to any member unable to work due to illness, funded by per capita assessments levied quarterly on all lodge members in good standing. The Ancient Order of United Workmen collected monthly dues of $1.25 and guaranteed a $2,000 death benefit, which was equivalent to roughly 2 years of average industrial wages in 1890. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers established its insurance department in 1867, and by 1905 it held $31 million in reserves backing life and disability policies for 85,000 members. These numbers are recorded in annual reports filed with state insurance commissioners across 14 states, accessible today at the respective state archives. Ethnic and immigrant mutual aid societies operated on the same principle at a smaller geographic scale. The Polish National Alliance, incorporated in Pennsylvania in 1880, structured its benefit fund around assessments levied per death. When a member died, every surviving member contributed a fixed amount, creating a self-replenishing pool, requiring no external investment. By 1910, the Alliance administered $3.8 million in active benefit coverage. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, founded in New York in 1881, combined immigration assistance with sick benefit payments and burial coverage, serving a population that arrived with no existing American institutional connections. The Italian Mutual Benefit Society of New Orleans, established in 1884, paid $1.50 daily sick benefits and covered burial costs of $75 per member, funded entirely by monthly dues of 60 cents. Across the industrial cities of the Northeast and Midwest, virtually every significant ethnic community had constructed at least one functioning mutual aid society before 1900. The agrarian household provided a parallel structure that required no formal organization at all. The 1900 federal census recorded that 62% of Americans over the age of 65 lived within the household of an adult child or sibling. In farming communities, this was not charity, it was economic logic. An elderly parent on a working farm contributed labor, childcare, and continuity of land tenure. Multi-generational households in rural counties of Iowa, Ohio, and Virginia were documented in county tax records as single economic units, with elderly members listed as co-owners of productive land. The arrangement served the interests of everyone involved and required no external administration. Trade union pension provisions added a third layer. The Granite Cutters International Association established a formal pension for members disabled by occupational lung disease as early as 1905, paying $4 weekly from a dedicated fund assessed against all active members. The Cigar Makers International Union operated death benefits, sick benefits, and out-of-work benefits simultaneously from a unified dues structure, with benefit expenditures recorded for 1900 alone. The International Typographical Union maintained a home for aged members in Colorado Springs, opened in 1892 and funded entirely by a 2-cent per week assessment on every member's dues, housing 200 retired typesetters by 1910. The combined benefit reserves of the major fraternal orders in 1910 exceeded $500 million. By the estimates of the National Fraternal Congress, the Oddfellows alone had paid over $200 million in death benefits between 1860 and 1905. The system had weaknesses, and the record requires accounting for them. Coverage was not universal. Agricultural laborers who migrated seasonally rarely accumulated enough lodge membership in any single location to qualify for benefits. Domestic workers were largely excluded from trade union structures and were often too poorly paid to sustain fraternal dues. The very poorest arrivals couldn't afford the monthly assessments that kept the benefit funds solvent. The system served the organized, the employed, and the settled. It left gaps, and those gaps were real. But the gaps in 1910 were not the void the textbooks describe. The system was documented, audited, and functioning across tens of millions of Americans in some form of structured protection. It was also, within 20 years, largely gone. The math that explains how that happened begins with one number. 12,658 American banks failed in 1929 and 1933, and the mutual aid funds sitting in their vaults failed with them. The crash did not arrive without warning, but the warning arrived too late for the people who needed it most. Between 1919 and 1929, the American industrial economy expanded at a pace that reshuffled the population in ways the fraternal system was never designed to absorb. The 1920 census recorded for the first time that more Americans lived in urban areas than in rural ones. That number was the statistical signature of a transformation that had been dissolving the old structures for 30 years without anyone formally accounting for the cost. The multi-generational farm household required land continuity to operate. A son who remained on his father's farm inherited not only the property but the obligation. When that son left for Detroit, Pittsburgh, or Gary instead, the obligation did not transfer with him. It lapsed. The 1920 census recorded the average household size in urban manufacturing counties at 4.2 persons, down from 5.7 in those same counties in 1890. By 1925, the United States Department of Agriculture estimated that 1.2 million farms had been abandoned or consolidated in the preceding decade. The elderly owners of those farms had no lodge in the nearest city. They had land that was worth less each year and children who sent money when they could. Fraternal orders attempted to follow their members into the cities. Oddfellows lodges opened in industrial neighborhoods of Chicago and Cleveland through the 1910s. The Ancient Order of United Workmen chartered new lodges in Pennsylvania steel towns as late as 1922. However, the fraternal model depended on geographic stability. A member who moved from Youngstown to Akron could transfer his lodge affiliation in theory, but in practice the paperwork lapsed, dues fell behind, and benefit eligibility was lost. The National Fraternal Congress noted in its 1921 annual report that lapsed membership had reached 18% across all affiliated orders, the highest rate recorded since 1898. Lapsed members did not receive benefits, nor did they contribute assessments. The actuarial foundations of the mutual benefit funds depended on a stable ratio of contributing members to benefit claimants, and migration was quietly destroying that ratio in lodge after lodge across the industrial Midwest. Then the banks failed. Between October 1929 and March 1933, 12,658 American banks suspended operations. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis documented the distribution in its 1934 annual review, showing failures were concentrated in rural and small-town markets, precisely the geography where fraternal benefit funds had maintained their largest reserves. The Woodmen of the world held approximately $18 million in benefit reserves in 1928, distributed across savings deposits in regional banks across Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. By 1932, the organization had lost an estimated $4.3 million to bank failures and had suspended full benefit payments to members in 6 states. The Royal Arcanum reduced its death benefit from $3,000 to $1,500 in 1931, notifying members by a circular letter that further reductions were under review. This letter, dated November 14, 1931, is preserved in the collection of the American Antiquarian Society in Worcester, Massachusetts. Ethnic mutual aid societies followed the same curve. The Slovak Catholic Circle, founded in 1905 and operating benefit funds for 30,000 members by 1928, suspended sick benefit payments in January 1932 after the Passaic County Bank holding its primary reserve account closed without warning. The organization's treasurer, Jan Kovacic, submitted a sworn accounting to the New Jersey State Insurance Commissioner in March 1932. Archived at the New Jersey State Archives in Trenton, it records total reserve losses of $214,000 and notes that 847 members actively receiving sick benefits at the time of suspension had no alternative income source identified. The Commissioner's office acknowledged receipt, but no relief mechanism was activated. Into this vacancy, the county poorhouse had been waiting for a century. The institution was not new in 1932. It was, in most American counties, the oldest continuously operating public welfare structure in existence. The first county poorhouse in the United States opened in Suffolk County, New York in 1660. By 1880, every state in the Union operated some form of county-administered almshouse system. The administrative logic was consistent across all of them. Residency was conditioned on the surrender of legal independence. Residents signed over any remaining property to county administration upon entry. They could not leave without permission, and they performed labor as assigned by the superintendent. The 1880 report on the defective, dependent, and delinquent classes produced by the United States Census Bureau under Superintendent Francis Walker documented 66,203 almshouse residents nationally, of whom 53% were over the age of 60. Walker's report described conditions at the Bucks County, Pennsylvania facility, citing 43 elderly men in a room designed for 20, inadequate ventilation, and a weekly food budget per resident of $1.12. The New York State Board of Charities inspected 61 county poorhouses in 1930 and published findings in February 1931, preserved at the New York State Library in Albany. 37 of those 61 facilities were overcrowded beyond designed capacity, and 14 housed elderly residents in the same dormitories as individuals committed for mental illness. The board recommended minimum standards legislation, but the legislature did not act. By 1932, the Cuyahoga County Poorhouse held 1,847 residents against a designed capacity of 600. The Allegheny County Almshouse reported 2,100 residents in December 1932. The county commissioner wrote to the Pennsylvania Department of Welfare describing conditions beyond any administrative capacity to manage with dignity. That letter is archived at the Pennsylvania State Archives in Harrisburg. Emergency state appropriations were requested, but the state was running a deficit of $43 million, and nothing was sent. Margaret Hess was born in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. She had been a member of the Ladies of the Maccabees since 1891, paying dues of 80 cents monthly against a sick benefit of $4 weekly and a death benefit of $500. In a 1939 interview conducted by a Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission researcher and preserved at the Commission's archive in Harrisburg, she described receiving a letter in 1931 informing her that her benefit fund had been suspended due to investment losses. She was 67 years old and her husband had died in 1928. She did not go to the poorhouse because her son would not permit it. She said she knew women who had no son, but she did not say what happened to them.